times of calls. So I've just got a few questions to ask about the DHS's implementation of the government guidelines on recognition of sex and gender, as to how the department has implemented those.
Oh, you wanted that? Yeah. Okay. Actually, that's a good point, because
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, Jonathan Humphrey, Deputy Secretary of Enabling Services.
Yes.
Corporate Services. Old job.
Yes.
And I can answer your question specifically concerning the way in which we've implemented the guidelines with respect to our staff.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, so
Sure.
that's right. So I just want an update as to what you have done to implement the guidelines in terms of both the combination of databases and forms for ensuring that people's gender identity is able to be accurately and appropriately recorded, and also what training and other support you have rolled out within the agency.
Sure, thank you very much. Look, from a staff perspective, we're compliant with the gender guidelines which have been published. The HR system allows people to select male, female or indeterminate genders on their system. In terms of the guidelines themselves, we have an overview training product which was released in 2016, and that's now part of the Department of Human Services induction program.
So is it mandatory then for that to be undertaken?
All new staff are required to undertake that program, and between the 1st of February 2016 and the 31st of March 2018, this training has been accessed 28,330 times.
Okay, so that's the level of new staff that we had at that time. How about for existing staff that were there before that training?
That would also include existing staff.
So it's been mandatory for existing staff to undertake it.
It wouldn't
as well?
be mandatory across the board, but it is apart from induction. So as new people start, it's all been mandatory training. Managers would have that training as part of their regular update. If I can, service delivery staff have specific training which focuses on the guidelines in respect of their working with customers, and that training in the same period, that training has been accessed 26,702 times.
Right, so what proportion of your staff then?
Had one sort of training or another, it'd be getting pretty close to 100%, but I'm afraid I don't have detail on that exactly for you.
And so then in terms of, so that's your staff systems and your HR. So in terms of the implementation of the guidelines, in terms of interaction with the public and the community.
Hi, Karen Harfield. I'm the General Manager for Information, Debt and Appeals. And we've been coordinating the rollout for interactions with customers. So certainly in terms of learning packages, it's a mandatory requirement for service delivery staff to do the gender guidelines supporting customers piece of work. What that means is that where they've identified that a customer wants to have a recognition of gender outside of male or female, that is recorded on the record, and that guidelines are provided to ensure that in any sort of future interaction that the preferred form of address is appropriately used. We've also made sure that in terms of having those conversations with staff, that social workers can be involved if it's a particularly difficult conversation for the customer, the individual, in terms of that. We've also worked around updating references on our external and internal websites, and to make sure that we, remove references to gender where it's not, an actual requirement or adds any sort of value to information that's been provided. We've also had a health check done from an external provider to ensure that what we've implemented is consistent with the guidelines, and that was finalised in January of this year, and it was concluded that we are consistent with the requirements of gender guidelines.
That's good to hear. So, I mean, you'd obviously, in terms of your outward-facing work, you've got contact with an awful lot of people. So, do you have is there a complaints process, or do you know anything about whether people have felt that their gender identity hasn't been well appreciated or respected?
We do have a complaints process, and because of the sensitive nature of the type of complaint that's around this process, they are considered at a higher level to ensure that we offer the right sort of support, and that's where the social worker can also be involved in the conversation. We certainly have had, I don't have the actual number, but we certainly have had a small number of complaints that we have managed people through that process to try and resolve them.
Right, okay. And how about other, I mean, you have work that's contracted out to other organisations that would, as part of the whole human services portfolio, isn't there? So in terms of those organisations, sort of, do you know whether they are compliant with the guidelines and what's required of those organisations?
We don't really contract out our work by and large. So all of the DHS, and we have contractors who perform services for us, and we have the 250 Serco operators that we've contracted to. They have to go through the same training as our own staff, but we haven't outsourced our service provision to third-party providers by and large. Our service centres we operate them ourselves, and with the exception of the Serco pilot, the call centres are all operated by our own staff. So it's sort of not like the Department of Employment that outsources employment services to a wide range of third parties. We actually run our service network ourselves.
So are there any agencies that fall under this human services then? Or are they, I mean, you're an agency obviously of social services, but...
So no, we're a separate portfolio.
A separate portfolio,
Senator,
okay.
Yeah.
So are there any other agencies then within your portfolio?
Australian Hearing is the only portfolio agency,
right,
but I don't think they're appearing in this estimate.
Okay. Do you know whether they are compliant with the guidelines?
We don't have that information immediately to hand, Senator, but we're just seeing if we can find out while we're at the table.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think probably that's all I need to know in terms of that's good. Thank you very much.